What's up, everybody? Welcome to The Frame. We take current events, cultural phenomena, and other topics that people don't generally like to talk about, and we try to look at them through a biblical frame of mind. My name's Jacob. I'll be hosting tonight, and we have a great show planned for you. So get your popcorn. Let's get going. Well, hi again. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and introduce our other hosts for the evening. Kevin, Tyler, how you guys doing tonight?
What's up?
I'm
doing all right.
Doing good.
All right. I think I just realized something. I asked a closed-ended question, I guess technically, instead of an open-ended question. Something that you can answer one word to. So how about this? I'm gonna say all right. Tell me the weirdest encounter you had this week.
Do you know where I work? Anybody who works in customer service will have a phenomenal answer to that question.
I am planning on it.
Okay, I can give you the weirdest encounter today. I don't know if it's the week, but I definitely know it's today. So earlier, the context you need to know is I work in the service department of a dealership, a car dealership. And so I'm basically responsible for first touch and getting people out, basically. I drive a lot of cars, give people their cars, their keys, right? First person they see, last person they say bye to. And so earlier today, we had this one guy come in. He was just picking up his car, so his car had been there. He was picking up his car and didn't speak any English. And we have multiple bilingual people who work there, English and Spanish. Didn't speak any Spanish, didn't speak any English. I don't know what he was speaking. Legitimately, I have no idea what this dude was speaking, but he would talk to you in this language as if you understood everything he said. He would just say things and have no recollection that you don't understand. He would just say things and just look at you, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And so basically he goes through the cashier, goes to the manager, because the cashiers have no idea what he's trying to say or what he's trying to do. So he goes to the manager. Eventually we get his keys, his paperwork, everything. Turns out we ended up not doing anything to his car. I don't know why. They don't tell me everything. Ended up not doing any work to his car. Gets to me. I'm pulling up his car. I'm literally backing out of the parking spot, and I turn to make sure it's clear. So I'm checking my blind spot, and I see him walking up to the car. And so I'm like, yep, it's weird enough. So I put the car in park. I get out. I'm like, yep, there you go. Doesn't understand me. He then again says something to me. Repeats something to me, and I have no idea what he's talking about. And he's just pointing at his wheels. He's pointing at the front driver's side wheel, then points at the rear driver's side wheel, is saying something. I have no idea what he's trying to tell me, but he's upset. He's not happy about it.
Uh-oh.
And I'm just I don't know what to do. This dude is not happy about something that apparently we did, but again, we didn't do anything. Or didn't do, maybe. But again, nobody there understood what he even wanted us to do with his car.
Ouch.
Apparently, because we didn't understand what he was saying, and he made no attempt to try to communicate with us in anything other than his native tongue.
Oof.
Of whatever it is.
That's rough.
So it gets better.
Oh no.
So I call my boss at this point because he's just going on, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I call him, and he's like, yeah, I'm watching him. So he's going back and forth between the wheels. Eventually he opens the trunk and just starts pointing. It's an older body style Camry, so a sedan. Opens the trunk and is gesturing into his carpet of the trunk. I'm there's nothing in his trunk. He's just pointing into his trunk and pointing at the wheels and pointing in his trunk. And I'm I don't know what's happening. So I call my boss, and while I'm on the phone with my boss, he's like, yeah, I'm watching this happen. the dude is pulling out whatever like random, like he had like a bag in his, like a plastic bag in his trunk, and he pulls out the basically the cover for the spare tire. He pulls a whole bunch of crap out and puts it onto the asphalt, the parking lot, just on the ground. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. My boss is like, I don't know. So eventually I walked away because there's other customers who needed help, and he's just doing his thing. So I'm like, all right. So some time goes by, and he gets back into his car. Trunk is still open. The stuff is still on the ground. He gets into the car, and I'm like, he's not gonna like back up, right? He's not gonna like leave, right? But no, he pulls out, and so where the parking lot is, we have some detail bays, so like a freestanding building that's not enclosed. It's just basically like a covering with multiple bays to pull cars in and detail them. And so he pulls out and pulls into there, presumably because he wanted to be in the shade. Then walks back, grabs the stuff that was on the ground and brings it back over to the car. And so while I'm doing all my other stuff, eventually I'm back inside, and I pass my boss, and he's like, "Did you see what he's doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like pulling stuff out, and he moved in the detail bay, and he's like, "Yeah," and he's putting his spare tire on. And I'm like,
What?
And so I go back out, and yeah, he's sitting in the detail bay with a jack under his car, lifting up the front left tire, and he's putting the spare tire on.
Oh my gosh.
And all of this is because we don't understand what he wants, and he doesn't know how to communicate anything to us. Or even make an attempt. He's literally like, if you just imagine somebody talking in their native tongue, but not like dumbing it down or trying to like communicate to you. Like if us talking
and not,
right
like,
now,
making gestures like this, like
no, like not making any kind of exaggeration or emphasis. Just like if we were having a normal conversation, except you had no clue what English was, and I was just talking to you, and you're just like, "Sure, bro." So he does all of this. Eventually, I guess, puts the spare tire on, puts everything back in his trunk, and leaves.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So that was the weirdest thing that's happened today.
Nice.
So there you go.
That's fun.
Yeah, I don't have anything that'll top that this week, and truthfully, I can't think of anything. Although I will leave you with this: when I went up to Asheville to help out with some of the like Hurricane Helene recovery,
Yeah.
I offered a ride to a guy, and it got very sketchy very quickly. So soon I was looking for a way to like drop him off. Got to that point, said adios, like, because similar language barrier. This guy spoke Spanish. I'm only like partially fluent, but he's having trouble like communicating it to me because like he knows no English whatsoever, and he's stuck in the middle of Asheville, no electricity. Like you can imagine.
Yep.
I get him. I make it known that like, hey, I've got things I need to go do. Drop him off on the side, and then I try and route myself to where I'm going. And I look in my side view mirror, and he's about to like pee on my car. Like, so I take off. I'm not kidding. So I take off before he can, complete his mission. And I just like see him in the mirror, like trying to zip himself up real quick before he gets caught. And I'm just like, dude, this is the weirdest thing I've seen in a long time.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
We want to get on topic now.
yeah.
I had a good laugh. But
I met Jesus yesterday. At youth group. He was in the form of a homeless man.
wow.
Who was camping out at the back door of the church, and so of course we had youth group, and so we have minors coming on campus, and so it's one of those things where we're like, hey, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to ask you to go somewhere else, at least for the next few hours. And so he comes around to the front, and he's standing outside outside the glass doors, and he's writing on a notepad, I'm like, hey, can I help you? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm just taking my notes. I'm Jesus Christ. I'm back. I'm taking notes on the churches, and man, churches in Marion County are there's something else. That's just everybody just closing the door, just like what you're about to do to me. And he just turns and starts walking away. I'm like, I will have a good night. And then he starts yelling and like dancing and skipping down the sidewalk. And I'm like, what is it? And we have students showing up and their parents are looking and they see me standing out there. And so I just kind of like, I catch their eye. I'm like, yeah, come on. Like, and so then the parents are actually like escorting their kids up to the church building because we're just like, I don't know what is happening right now with this guy. So thankfully he left, but yeah, that was fun.
You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Speaking of which, our topic tonight, Peter.
Yeah.
Whether or not he is the rock of the church, which we don't believe he is. But with that, Tyler, I will hand it
Spoiler
to you,
alert.
sir.
Yeah, so
this is part 2.
yeah.
Part 2.
No, so we are continuing our last segment, and unfortunately we had some, I guess, personal matters get in the way. We weren't able to record last time we wanted to, and
Like the
we are
last few
following
times.
up. Yeah, the last few times. We are following up on our previous subject of whether or not Peter is the rock of Matthew 16. So this is part 2 of our last episode, and we are going to be covering the historical considerations, mainly focusing on what was the view of the early church. You may hear us refer to like the early church fathers, and when we say that, we're kind of loosely talking about like before like 500 AD. Like, so for the first 500 years of the church, what were they thinking? I know early church fathers is kind of a catch-all term for just, any, I guess, pre-medieval in a lot of circles, but I think we're primarily focusing on those first 500 years of Christianity, and what was the norm? What were they interpreting from this passage? They were very close to those who lived it and who taught it and who received these teachings from Christ himself. So that's where we're not going to make that necessarily gospel, like what their beliefs were, but this will help give us some contextual ideas. I think it'll help us have the right historical context for a proper way to interpret Matthew 16. Again, we went over context clues of the New Testament last time. We went through grammatical clues as to what that was, and we have what I feel like is a pretty strong conclusion based on that. But now we're diving into church history as well. So,
Sweet.
yeah, with that said, I want to recap. There are 3 possible interpretations or 3 mainline interpretations of Matthew 16 as to who or what the rock of Matthew 16 is. The first one is going to be that Christ himself is the rock in Matthew 16. So when Christ says, "And upon this rock I will build my church," we have those who believe that Christ himself is that rock. Okay, another view is that Peter is this rock. This is the Catholic view, that Christ was talking to Peter and saying that, like, you are the rock upon which I will build my church. And then the third view is that it is Peter's confession that Jesus is the Messiah that is the rock. So it's Peter's revelation that God the Father revealed to Peter, where Christ says, "Blessed are you, for flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven." And so that revelation is the rock of Matthew 16 when Jesus is speaking to Peter. Those are the 3 main interpretations of this passage. So first off, I want to start with Christ being the rock. I will preface this first example by saying that Augustine held I believe, two of these viewpoints throughout his lifetime, and I'll touch on that more later. But Christ, being the rock of Matthew 16, was a viewpoint shared by Augustine and Ambrose. I'm not entirely sure that I'll pronounce all of these names right, but I will
That's
do my
okay.
best. And we're just giving a couple examples here as well. I'm not listing off every early church father here. Those who believed Peter was the rock of Matthew 16. We're looking at Tertullian and Cyprian of Carthage. And then those who believed that Peter's confession that Jesus was the Christ, we have Origen and then John Chrysostom, Chrysostom
I think that
from the
might be
fourth
it.
century. What's that?
Oh, I was trying to picture the one. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So, John Chrysostom, we're just going to roll with that from the
Yeah.
fourth century. These are, who we're looking at for these interpretations. The reason why I highlight this right now is just to point out that there were different viewpoints on the interpretation of this passage, as
Yeah.
with many other things. And why this is important in my mind is because the Catholic Church has long taught that Matthew 16 has always been understood by the church
Mhm.
to be that Christ was calling Peter the rock
Yep.
in Matthew 16. And I think historically we can prove that that is false. It's just not the case. And in reality, it's not even been the majority view
Yeah.
as far as interpretation of this passage. And so that's where I think the water gets really muddy, because as many people will argue, the entire claim to Catholic authority really hinges on this idea that Peter is the rock that Christ built his church on, and that transitive authority with Peter as the head of the church was passed down from Peter to his disciple, so on and so forth, in effect creating the papacy that we
Yep.
have today. And so this is why this is an important issue, why this is, in my mind, a very important topic, because if this is false, I do not believe that Catholicism as a belief system has any legs to stand on. Jacob, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think that's a really good point. I would agree. I think that is such a core part. It's almost like I want to separate like actual like salvation theology from authority theology
Mhm.
somewhat, but at the same time, like I do kind of feel like that specific thing in terms of Peter being the rock that Jesus is talking about there is such a core thing to Catholicism's argument for authority in the church, as far as saying like, oh, any church that essentially calls themselves a church but isn't in agreement or in submission or under our purview and whatnot isn't a true church. Really hinges on that specific thing, and I would dare say it's that is almost as important then for the Catholic Church as like the resurrection itself, because like for us as Christians, I mean, it's in the New Testament. If Christ is not raised, then we believe in vain. We are above all to be pitied if Christ is not raised, because if
Yeah.
that's the main thing. If he didn't rise again from the dead, like that's literally like everything about Christianity falls apart without the resurrection of Jesus. And so I kind of almost like it's almost as important as Jesus' resurrection, because without Peter being the rock that Jesus refers to, the Catholic Church doesn't have a basis to say we are the absolute authority and everyone else needs to be under our pick a word, jurisdiction, purview, whatever. And so it does allow then for churches to be birthed. It allows for your average Joe who believes in Jesus and is reading their Bible to go out and start a church, which is what most, I would say, most of the Protestant world believes, is that anyone can be anointed to plant a church. Anyone can be gifted, can be led, can be called to do so. Now, obviously, I believe that we should all be in some kind of mentorship, submission to some kind of authority that is more experienced and wiser than ourselves, because I never want to assume that I have everything together. I don't think any of us have perfect theology. But yeah, and because of that, it does almost seem like this one statement is almost at the same level as believing in the resurrection of Jesus, which kind of feels a little heretical to say. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I had the same example in mind, as far as like the importance of this to Catholic theology.
I
I
apologize if
think
I jumped
it.
ahead in your notes. I don't
No,
remember
you're
if that
good.
was in there or not.
No, I don't think I put that in my notes at all.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, but I had the same thought process, is that with Christianity in general, the whole thing hinges on whether or not Christ raised from the dead.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at belief systems, you want to look at the central belief that, like, if you disprove that, the whole castle comes tumbling down. I think that for Catholicism is the claim to authority. And where
Yeah.
does that claim to authority come from? Primarily through Matthew 16.
Yep.
And with Jesus establishing Peter as the rock, and in essence, the first pope, the
Right.
head of his church. Um, Now, I do believe that, yes, Peter could be the head of the church, and that still would not in essence give us the papacy the claim to authority that they have either. So we can say that those are two separate issues, because I don't know about you, but when I read Matthew 16, I see nothing about transitive authority. By that we mean authority that is passed down from one person to another in that moment. um, I don't even see that throughout the rest of the New Testament in terms of an authority to lead and guide the church. Now, yes, there is discipleship. There is go out and make disciples, train them in the way of Jesus. But as far as we have authority of interpretation,
Yeah.
we have authority and jurisdiction over the church.
Mm-hmm.
I've yet to find that in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Um, And so I think this is really important to look in context at, what is the historical view, especially when the Catholic Church claims that this is the view that has always been known to the church to be the proper
Yeah.
interpretation. Um, and it's always been the interpretation of the church. And I think that's provably false because of the early church fathers and their interpretations of this passage. It's not always been understood to be this way. And so with that said, um, in the early church, all three views are represented and sometimes were also combined. So it was not uncommon that somebody would have somewhat of a mixed opinion rather than compartmentalizing all three of these ideas. We have this one idea where Peter is the rock exclusively versus representatively. So some people hold to the
Okay.
belief that Peter is representative of the basically the church at large and the confession that Jesus is the Messiah. That Peter in this moment is the first representation of the church acknowledging that Christ is the Son of God, is the Messiah, the lamb slain before the world, whatever term, whatever term you want to give him, but
Sure.
that Christ there's the list is long, but that Christ is the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah, and that this confession that is revealed to us by God is representatively displayed in Peter for the first time. And so some people hold to that view, whereas others believe that this is Peter exclusively being that rock.
Right.
So that is also another slight twist on these interpretations. Um, I want to read
Which,
a.
if
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
remember correctly, correct me on this if I'm wrong, I believe producer Kevin kind of sits in that camp for the most part. Is that producer Kevin? Is that accurate? Or 'cause I remember we talked about it a little bit on the last one.
I'm not gonna lie. I've been trying to fix an issue,
I'm sorry.
so I don't know what we're talking about.
You're doing a great job.
I'm doing my job. Is the essence of what I'm trying to say.
By the way, if you were trying to fix my audio feedback,
it
loop,
is fixed, by the way, yes.
I found the source. I'm sorry about that.
The issue is fixed.
Great. Thank you for fixing the issue.
Awesome.
It was the basically the twist on like that Peter is the rock, but it's more of a representation aspect, so that Jesus is saying that yes, you Peter are the rock, but he's not saying it as in Peter specifically and only Peter, but that it's Peter as a he's using Peter but as a representation of it. Was that right,
Yeah,
Tyler?
yeah. Yeah, assuming that's
Yeah.
what Tyler was saying, I think that's what Jacob was trying to clarify. But yeah, that's the camp I'm living in. At least for the moment, you can always change. But basically, the idea that, in like the literal sense, when Jesus says "and on this rock," he is specifically referring to Peter. But not to the extent that Peter is the rock of the church, if that makes sense. Basically, not that Peter is the foundation of the church, but rather that he is going to use Peter and his personality and basically the way that God created Peter to be, he is going to use that to build his church. And so, again, not that Peter is the rock of the church, but Jesus is referring to him as the rock he is going to use to build his church.
So now we get to the fighting portion of the podcast where we argue with each other. No, I'm kidding. See, folks, it's okay to have different views on some
No, it's
things.
not. You're all wrong.
Oh my gosh, Kevin, shut up. No, I'm kidding. I think we would all be a lot better off if we could learn to disagree with each other on things that aren't salvation issues. That's another topic for another time.
Truly.
Sorry, Tyler. Didn't mean to
make
hijack
life-
it.
No.
As you were talking about that, I was like, hey,
much easier.
we actually have a representative of that camp in our midst.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up because honestly, I'd forgotten about that with it being almost like a
It's
month.
probably like a
since our
month
last
ago.
episode.
I think it was. So yeah, be careful what you say. You don't want to offend our producer. I'm kidding.
But yeah. With all of that, with all of that in mind, I do want to move to some examples of this. So first, I am going to highlight a quote from Augustine. This was in the year 426, 427 AD in his work Retractions. So this was later in Augustine's life where he's writing to say like, hey, I'm kind of retracting some of my previously held writings, beliefs. And, as I've matured, this is where I've come to in my understanding now. So I'm going to read that quote. Peter, called after this rock, represented the person of the church, which is built upon this rock, and has received, quote, the keys of the kingdom of heaven, quote, or end quote, for, quote, thou art Peter, end quote, and not, quote, thou art the rock, end quote, was said to him. But the rock was Christ, in confessing whom, as also the whole church confesses. Oh, I just got I love technology. I just got locked on my tablet as
Oh
I was reading.
no.
We're back up. No, we're back up. Just lock screen. Um, in confessing whom, as also the whole church confesses, Simon was called Peter. I know that that is probably very confusing, and I should have sent this over to Kevin beforehand to throw this quote up. Maybe he can throw this up there and get us some magic. But
Depends on how
so
fast I can find it. Can you send it to me?
Just
so
what, you don't have a perfect memory to just type it from like just type it up because you remember exactly what he said?
yeah. Let me where do you want this? Discord or text? What's easiest
Discord.
for you?
Always Discord.
Okay. Always Discord.
I do find it ironic that the name of the app is called Discord, but we're trying to pursue unity. I've always wondered why they called it
Yes.
that.
I have
I thought
thought
this
of
was
that
Fight
as
Club.
well.
It is bro, we don't talk about it. Rule number 1, man.
My brother in Christ. This is on the internet.
Well, I guess Fight Club's out now.
Just like the
I
movie.
will. I do have to say I love that movie.
It is a good movie.
Even though it possibly should not. Just some tasteless things in there, but just the story. I'm a sucker for a good story.
That's one of those movies where I go, I can't recommend this movie,
Yeah.
but from a non Christian standpoint, just from a film standpoint, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It
The
kinda checks
writer
all the
in me
boxes.
recognizes the extreme intelligence in crafting that story. So that's
Yeah.
Kevin, that is in the Discord post, the post-it board. Okay.
Did you just want me to share this image or?
No, please
Okay,
no.
okay.
Find the quote for me.
Okay.
That's my handwriting. So, I mean, which is not horrible. It's just like that's not the best image for this. Anyways, so Peter represented the person of the church, which is built upon the rock of Matthew 16. This was Augustine's idea later in life and has received the keys of the kingdom of heaven. I think the most significant part of this quote, Augustine says, "For thou art Peter, and not thou art the rock," was said to him. Again, let's rewinding back to our last episode. What does Peter mean? Peter, in essence, is like calling someone Rocky. Now, it was a nickname, if you will, that was given to Peter, I believe, in part to signify his particular role as a disciple, as being someone like rock solid, sturdy, a foundation, and yes, someone who Christ would build his church upon, in essence. But I do believe that the context of Matthew 16 bears out that when Christ is talking to him in this specific moment, what he is talking about is Peter's confession and the revelation from God the Father to Peter that Jesus is the Messiah. I believe that we have historical context for that as well as context throughout the rest of the New Testament. But the rock was Christ, continues Augustine, in confessing whom as also the whole church confesses. So saying that like the whole church also confesses that the rock was Christ. And Simon, also known as Peter, was in essence named for this reason, because that rock is that confession. So this was Augustine's view later in life, that again, thou art Peter was not said to him, but thou art the rock. And he ends this by saying the rock was Christ, just as the entire church confesses. Simon Peter I believe he's saying was representative of this as well. And on that rock, that revelation is what the church would be built on. Jacob, you
Mm.
had something?
I was just gonna go back to, and I think it bears pointing out and reiterating the grammatical side, because that's kind of what Augustine is,
Yeah.
or Augustine is hitting on here, is that grammatical aspect of, okay, well, Jesus said, "You are Peter, and then on this rock I will build my church," and he didn't say, "You are Peter, you are the rock, and on you I will build my church." And we talked in the last episode about the various like play on word grammatical things that that is very common throughout Hebrew culture, throughout the Bible. Like there's a lot of stuff where God will do play on word things for the purposes of illustrating a point. It actually, not to take it too far off. I had a student ask me recently. They were wondering about in the Book of Job where it talks about the Leviathan. They were like, "Hey, so like, was there just one Leviathan like on the whole earth? Like, was it like a specific creature that there was just one of that creature?" And I'm like, "Why do you think that?" And they're like, "Because it says the Leviathan." He's like, "Look at the Leviathan." And so like, but you would only use the if you're talking about a specific thing, right? And I'm like, well, you could argue that, but there's also the aspect where I could say like, if I'm trying to if I'm writing a poem and I say, look at the lion, see how it prowls, see how it hunts its prey, blah 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 blah, you're not going to assume that I'm talking about a specific lion. You're not going to assume that there's only one lion in the world. You're going to understand that, oh no, I'm talking about the idea of a lion. I'm talking about lions in general, the shared characteristics they have. And so that's kind of how when I see it talking about like, think about the Leviathan. Are you going to try to catch it with a fish hook? That's how I see that, is he's using this in the middle of rebuking Job. God is using poetic verbiage, poetic grammar style to illustrate a point, as he is essentially giving a verbal beatdown to Job in this case. And so for me, I kind of like, that's how I also see it in this case, is that Jesus is doing the same thing. Like he's praising Peter. He's affirming Peter for having said the right thing finally, not putting his foot in his mouth, even though he does it again a few verses later. And saying like, you finally like you've grown into the name that I've given you. You are Peter, because you finally recognize what the foundation is. And so then on that foundation is how I'm going to build my church. And I think there's a mixture there too. Like how Kevin said about how Peter is highly influential in the founding of the church. He's one of the essentially sort of kind of the leader of the 12 disciples. And so given that, with what Augustine is saying, where where he's pointing out that Jesus says, "You are Peter, and on the rock, on this rock," why didn't he just say, "And on you"? Or why didn't he say, "You are a rock, and on that rock"? Because that would seem grammatically to fit better. But Jesus intentionally used the two different words that technically have two different meanings, even though they're from the same root. And I think that was intentional to show the play on words, while also removing that aspect of that that Peter himself is specifically the special one, the chosen one to build the church.
I want to, and to add to your point, to just illustrate that we're not pulling this idea of Jesus using illustrative language out of thin air.
Yeah.
In this moment, they were standing in a place on top of a rock that was above what was known as like the gates of Hades. So Christ is using this imagery in the moment to help him illustrate a point when he says, "And the gates of Hades will not prevail against it," when talking about the church.
Yeah.
And so, again, keep this in mind. They were in like a pagan location, and forgive me, I don't have all of my. I'm a little fuzzy on my details here, but they're standing on top of a rock above what was commonly referred to as the gates of Hades. Again, not hell, but the gates of Hades. Um, Two different ideas here.
Yeah.
And this is what Christ is referring to in this moment, using their surroundings as an image. As he often does with his words, he's painting a picture here again.
Yeah. Which
Um,
that, by the way, for those of our viewers who might be unfamiliar with that idea, so the word hell actually um isn't in the Bible. Then the reason for that is because we have that word as in the English language. That kind of is it for us is mostly an all-encompassing idea of the quote unquote bad place that that you go to when you die. But in all through actually throughout the Bible, in Hebrew understanding and Greek understanding and pretty much everything understanding up until I don't even know when, more recently, they actually had this understanding of multiple places, which is why, like in the book of Revelation, it talks about that that death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and the sea gave up the dead that was in. And it talks about like different places, and that's not me saying that there are like different locations that souls go to. There might be, I don't know, I haven't been there, so it's a very contended part of theology. There are a lot of different viewpoints on it, but suffice it to say, there are different words that they used to illustrate
have
the
different meanings.
right, that had different meanings in terms of their understanding of what that place was. And so like the two most popular ones, or the two most used ones, are Hades and Gehenna. Which
Yep.
I'm not going to go into the differences, but like that's why this is important, is because like this spot where he was talking to them about this had significance specifically about Hades versus Gehenna. And so Jesus continuing this this literary structure where he's using certain literary terms with intention, with purpose, because of their surroundings and because of what's going on and what they're talking about. He uses Hades specifically because of that being where they are. So just like what Tyler's saying, like they were standing on a rock that had to do with a physical site that was associated with Hades. And so he's pointing out that like, hey, on this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not be able to stand against it. Like it won't be the essentially the church. His church will end up actually prevailing against the gates of Hades. The gates of Hades won't be able to stand in its presence. So yeah, just pointing that out in case you were like, huh, what the heck?
All right.
Yep.
What you got, Kev?
So I found the quote from Augustine. I'm assuming you wanted what he actually said, correct?
Yeah.
Sure, I found the right thing. Okay. Because I ended up, so it's coming out of his retractions, the retractions.
As long as you have the right quote.
Yeah, no, I ended up downloading a PDF of his entire thing.
Nice.
I guess he has a bunch of retractions.
I should have told you the address. Yeah, it's 20.1.
So I did find it.
Good job. Way to go.
So
Yeah.
here it is. Specifically, this is the part, and so Peter called after this the rock, represented the church, which is built upon this rock, and has received the keys of the kingdom. For thou art Peter, and not thou art the rock, was said to him. But the rock is Christ, or the rock was Christ, in confessing whom, as also the whole church confesses Simon was called Peter.
Thank you for pulling that up and just proving that I wasn't making up so what I
Did
was
not make it
talking
up.
about. All right. I want to move on to more of a summary of the historical view of the church because we could spend hours and hours diving into each of the individual views. But thankfully, the Catholic Church actually did our homework for us on this.
Woo!
Yeah. So I am going to be pointing us to the work of Archbishop Peter Richard Kenrick. Again, this is looking into the doctrine of Matthew 16:18. All right, so Archbishop Peter Richard Kenrick, which, if you are not familiar at all with Catholic structure, Archbishop is very, very high up, extremely influential within the Catholic Church. This is not like your common layperson. This is a big deal. Let's
Is
just put it that way.
Archbishop like local church congregation? Is this like overseeing multiple congregations? Is this like like this person's in like Rome? Like where about? Like how high are we talking? I'm not familiar with the structure, so I'm asking for
So
myself.
don't trust me on this. I'm quite certain that your archbishop is over your bishops.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so I
That actually
believe
makes a
this
lot
is
of
a
sense.
position that is in. I believe this is a position that is in Rome.
Okay.
But again, don't quote me on that because maybe they travel. I'm not extremely familiar with their ins and outs. I just know that archbishops are very influential. These are guys that know their stuff within the Catholic Church. They
Sweet.
have a position of importance within the structure there. Okay. So again, he held significant authority within the church. He prepared a paper on the subject of the rock of Matthew 16, and this was intended to be delivered to the First Vatican Council in 1870. Also, I want to cite my source here on this. There was a YouTube video that helped point all of this out to me. I will link that in the description later for anyone who wants to watch that. I will go ahead and warn you, he is less than charitable to the Catholic viewpoint. Um,
Is this the video that
not
we
the
watched
way,
earlier?
yeah, not the
Yeah.
way I would have gone about presenting some of this stuff, but
He's very
I'm using it.
tactless.
Yeah, I'm
That's a
using
nice
it
way of putting it.
because he does do good homework, and
Yeah.
this man is very knowledgeable, especially when it came to the Greek, the grammar, which I found extremely insightful, and I wish I'd found it for our last episode. But
That would have been fun. Yeah.
for anybody who's interested, I will have that linked in the description. But just wanted to say that I did grab some of this from somebody else. Um, Back to Archbishop Kenrick. He was supposed to deliver this paper to Vatican I in 1870, which, again, Vatican I is a huge council that was held during that time to kind of wrap up, if you will, like, what do we believe? What are our core doctrines? That sort of thing. Um, and this was never delivered. No
Mm.
explanations as to why. I don't want to speculate on that, but he was doing this for the purpose of having it available for Vatican I.
Hmm.
His paper was published afterward, though, and is still available today. So Kenrick's research was thorough and scholarly. It was filled with historical sources, and his conclusion was that historically the majority, again, this is coming from the Catholic Church, the conclusion was that the majority of the early church fathers did not interpret the rock as being Peter
Hmm.
himself.
Wow.
Instead, the majority of early church leaders interpreted the rock as Peter's confession of faith that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God.
Hmm.
Kenrick went on to point out that this interpretation, the rock as Peter's confession, was the predominant view among the early church fathers, not the identification of Peter as the personal foundation of the church. Um, Needless to say, this contradicted the later doctrinal developments leading up to Vatican I, where
Mhm.
papal infallibility and the primacy of Peter were formally defined.
Yeah.
So I want to repeat that. This research, like a deeply researched view, contradicted the later doctrinal developments that occurred at Vatican I that established uh, papal infallibility, so that the Pope um, is infallible in
Mhm.
teachings, and the primacy of Peter, which that is a term for Peter was like the first of the popes,
Yeah.
and where those were formally defined, canonized beliefs, if you will, of the Catholic Church. And so, again, they look into this. They have Archbishop Kenrick do an investigation into the early church beliefs, and then later go on to say, no, the church has always known this. Um, I don't think this holds water at all.
So
And
you
so,
mentioned
like,
that you mentioned that his paper never made it to the council, right?
it was not delivered at Vatican One.
Oh, like they didn't read it out like
They didn't.
for
Yeah, they
them
did not
to
use it.
hear or anything.
It was
Interesting. And
not
then how
used
long
in
after did he publish it?
that. I do not know. That's something that is a good question that I would like to go and find the answer to. Maybe Kevin can pull that up for us. But the whole point
Sorry, what?
was,
What am I pulling up?
When
when
when did he
when did
publish
Art?
his finding?
Yeah, yeah,
Archbishop Kenrick. When did he publish his findings on historical
Matthew 16.
on Matthew 16? Versus when Vatican One happened? Like how long after Vatican One did he publish it? Because that
And
is
again,
really
I think,
interesting.
yeah, I think the important point here is that like he was preparing this for Vatican One, and then it was not used
Yeah.
at all. It was sidelined for whatever reason. Maybe they had some issues with his scholarship. Maybe they didn't like what he had to say. Again, I don't want to speculate too much and assume the worst about the church in this moment,
Sure.
but for whatever reason, they decided not to use his findings.
Hmm.
Um,
And they don't have any notes either on like why they didn't use it. Like there's no refutation of anything that he's put out in terms of like trying to disprove his paper or anything like that. It's just no, he just decided not to use it. Or it just
that I
wasn't
don't
used
know.
rather.
Yeah, that I did not look into as far as whether or not the Catholic Church later specifically refuted Archbishop Kenrick's findings.
Okay.
But I do know that he was assigned to do this, and then they did not use his homework. So,
Wow. That is crazy. I
um,
mean, that's literally like having a group project and everyone in the group is like, "Hey, this is what we think should be the result of our group project and everything." And one person is like,
mhm.
"Hey, I did a really deep dive in this one specific spot and this is what I found and it completely contradicts the thing that we're wanting to claim. So, we probably shouldn't say that." And they're like, yeah, we're not going to use that." Like, and I'm not
Yeah,
again. I'm not saying that that's exactly what happened because that would be pretty bad if they were just like, yeah, no, we see this, we agree, but we're just not gonna we're just not gonna use it. I'm not gonna say that's what happened, but
yeah.
it
It's
definitely raises a lot of questions.
it does seem fishy to me. I mean, if you ask me. So
Yeah,
I
just a little.
So I'm not sure. I don't know. It looks like 1870 to me.
okay. So that would have been the same year.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. That's even to me that's even crazier. The fact
Yeah.
that he
So
published it the same year
mhm,
almost is like like okay, think about it in modern terms. Like modern day. If someone is assigned
mhm,
to do research on something, they uncover something that is contrary to what the popular view is, or at least
mhm,
what they're wanting to be the view. And then they, for whatever reason, say, no, we're not going to use this as we are concreting our decision on this matter. And so then this person who's a high ranking person in the company essentially goes and just says, all right, well then, hey, you know what? You didn't want to use it. I'm just going to go ahead and publish it out for everyone to see. Like that
yeah,
seems really intentional, especially if the fact that I mean, I all right. I'm gonna put it in terms of a company, not because I'm trying to say that the Catholic Church or Catholicism is a business, but I think if this were to happen at a company, people would be crying foul all over the place. They would be
yeah,
looking at this going, "Oh my gosh, that dude's about to get fired." And like if he went on TikTok and is like, hey, I know our company just decided this, but here's my findings. Just so you guys know, I was given this task specifically to research this area. I submitted it to them and they decided not to use it. Do with that information what you will. Like, that'd be
yeah,
the kind of video that people would then be going, hey, witness protection, y'all need to go get this guy before someone else does. Like,
yeah,
I like you said, it seems fishy, and for me, the fact that he did it, that he then published it so close, same year,
mhm,
to me makes it sound like he was intentionally trying to make it publicly known that the Catholic Church, that he didn't agree with what the
yeah,
Catholic Church was doing, and
mhm.
I mean, I'd be interested to find out what happened to him after that because I can't imagine that they would have been just cool
Maybe
with it, with him staying an
maybe that'll
archbishop
be
after
our
that.
next episode, conspiracy cover up. But I do wanna jump into a few more points because we don't have
Yeah,
much, longer here.
yeah, go for it.
Um, I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper into his findings. So Archbishop Kenrick points out the five, I guess, main interpretations. Now, again, earlier we talked about the three, what I call main interpretations. Kenrick found that there were five different interpretations of this
Oh,
passage. But again, there are three main ones
sure.
in my mind. Um, so Kenrick points out the five interpretations of the identification of the rock in Matthew 16:18, to which important fathers of antiquity held. Um, so, one, all Christians were the quote living stones. This view was held by very few fathers. Origen, who is a common source of patristic tradition, patristic meaning early church fathers, states, if we also say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, then we also become Peter. For whoever assimilates to Christ becomes rock.
Hmm,
Does Christ give the keys of the kingdom to Peter alone, whereas other blessed people cannot receive them?
hmm,
Question. This
hmm.
was said by Origen in commentary or his commentary on Matthew. Okay. Next point. Uh, all of the apostles was another view that was held. Eight fathers. Cyprian was one of which. Christ as the rock, 16 fathers. Eusebius, early Augustine. Remember, he had his retractions later. Eusebius of Caesarea. Okay, so we've got a little bit. Sorry.
Hmm,
Eusebius of Caesarea. Maybe those are two different people. That I don't know.
hmm.
That would be good to know.
That would be.
Oh, I okay. I see what's going on here. He's just expounding upon this point again. I'm pulling from some of the notes from the YouTube video that I mentioned earlier. So Eusebius of Caesarea, in his view, which is the rock is Christ, he links this interpretation with the parallel rock and foundation statements of First Corinthians 3:11 and
Mhm.
First Corinthians 10:4. The next view, Peter as the rock, 17 church fathers. So, well, we'll continue on to the next point. And then the rock upon which the church was built was the faith that Peter confessed, was found in 44 church
Wow.
fathers. And again, this is the work of Archbishop Kenrick.
That's a
Um,
lot. That's a
not,
big difference.
yeah. So he found that 44 held to the view that the rock was the confession by Peter of Jesus being the Christ, the Messiah.
What's that
In
percentage? I don't suppose you pulled that up, did you? Like the total.
No.
Kevin, can
So,
you add
okay,
up that total number real quick
basically,
and find out what 44
well,
is?
so only 20% of the fathers held to the view that Peter was the rock. I do have that, but
Gotcha.
so the rock upon which the church was built, being the faith that Peter confessed, um, included the most significant fathers. So, Saint Basil,
Okay.
Cyril of Alexandria, Chrysostom. There's that hard one again. Ambrose, Hilary, Jerome, Augustine, later in life in his retractions. So we have a pretty significant chunk of some of the most influential early church leaders
Yeah.
that held to this view. And again, 44 versus the 17
Yeah.
who viewed Peter as the rock, and the 16 who viewed Christ exclusively as the rock. So we're looking at 16, 17, and 44.
Yeah.
Again, this just blows the narrative out of the water that the church has always known this
Yeah.
to be the case. It's just not true.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
it's kind of hard to argue against in terms of from the historical side of this argument. Like
Mhm.
it's really hard to say that historically this has been the case. Historically this has been accepted because that right there from
yeah.
like you said, research
And
from
this is
within the Catholic Church.
this is where I kind of get passionate about it is like this is the problem with adhering strictly to Catholic authority because they will tell you these things and I don't say this to be rude or mean to anyone who adheres to Catholic faith, but they tell you these things, and if you do not read history, you just blindly trust in what the Catholic Church teaches, you are being led astray in this area
Yeah.
because it's just not true. Like all you have to do is go back and read history, read the letters, read the books that were written by the early church, and you will find that this view was not the most commonly held view.
Yeah.
And for the first several hundred years of the church, the idea of a pope had not even entered consciousness. It's just
Yeah.
like this was a later development, a specific sect of Christianity that grew into a large, powerful organization who later claimed to have ultimate authority over interpretation, who later claimed to have infallibility in their teachings. And I can't get behind that because like one, like the evidence just doesn't support it. Now, like to contrast this, when we do archaeological digs, like
Mm.
every year there are hundreds of archaeological digs that are done concerning these time periods. And it's like every single one has ended up confirming the truths that we find in the Bible, uncovering truths. And so in contrast, we have, digging into history and is disproving Catholic teachings. Like I don't think that you can hold that as infallible.
Yeah.
Like I think we need to stick to things that are proven. And so like I feel like I'm getting a bit off trail here.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that I mean, you essentially, like you said, you have an organization. You have a group of within the church, and I say the church is in the capital C, the global body of believers. You have a group within the church that essentially wanted to create their own version of, hey, here's canon, here's what we believe to be true, and they sort of, I mean, for the most part, basically said like, hey, we're gonna have the only view, and also we are claiming to have authority over all of the other versions that exist, to the extent that we're going to say, if you don't agree with our version, then you don't get to be part. And I get that people are going to point out and be like, well, what about the Council of Nicaea? They did the same thing. And the problem is the Council of Nicaea were church leaders from across different groups. Like, in this specific thing in the Vatican Council in Vatican I, it was all within this one group. It would be like a single denomination getting together and deciding, hey, let's get the tenets of our specific denomination, and then also claim that our denomination is the only right one, and all of the other ones are have to be in submission to us. Otherwise, they're not Christians. They're not actually following Jesus. And while, yes, there's strife between denominations in the Protestant church because of these different things, and yes, each denomination thinks that they have the corner of the market, I don't think any one denomination within the Protestant church would go so far as to say, like a Baptist isn't going to say, hey, if you're a Methodist, you're automatically not saved. A Presbyterian isn't going to say to a Pentecostal, oh, you are not saved because you don't believe the same exact things that we do as a Presbyterian. And even to an extent, we don't even say that about Catholics, even, because we still understand that at the very root of Catholicism is still Christ and Christ crucified and raised back to life, and salvation through faith alone. And now, yes, there's stuff added, but I believe that there are a lot of Catholics, there are a lot of practicing Catholics who have an understanding of that and realize that it is through Jesus alone, it is through faith alone, and they have some other stuff that they're doing along with it, but they understand that stuff doesn't save them. And so I truly believe that there are Catholics who are Christians. And I think the problem that I have is the fact that basically this one group got together and said, we're the only one. And if you don't agree with us, and if you're not part of us, then you have no part whatsoever. And they made these various aspects as important as salvation itself. And so it's not this. The Vatican I Council is not the same as the Council of Nicaea in terms of trying to determine, hey, what's canon, what do we believe, and what are the things that we say, like, hey, this is part of it and this is absolutely not. Not to mention that when they did that, they went off of historical stuff. Like, they went off of, hey, what were the Hebrew scriptures? What did the Hebrew nation, what did the Jewish people agree were the scriptures from the Old Testament? And now what are we adding from the last few hundred years of since Jesus? What are we adding to clarify how we should live and what things are true under this new covenant of grace, of salvation by grace through faith? And they left a lot to interpretation. I mean, given the fact that there are so many denominations, I think that's kind of evidence of that, of how much they left to interpretation to avoid saying, these are the tenets, these are the things that are important, that this is what we believe as a global church.
I wanna wrap this up here
Yeah.
with one last point. Um, so a note from Roman Catholic apologist H. Byrne Murdoch. He says that none of the writings of the first 2 centuries describe Saint Peter as a bishop of Rome. In fact, no one before Bishop Callistus in AD 223 um, ever used Matthew 16:18 to support the primacy of the Roman bishop, what
Hmm.
we would refer to as the Pope. No one.
Hmm.
This was in his work, The Development of the Papacy, published in 1954. And one last note, at the first church council in Jerusalem. So this is the first church council.
Yeah.
Okay, the earliest of the early church. It was James. It was James, the brother of Jesus, and not Peter, who was the leading speaker and
Hmm.
decision maker for the church at this council.
Wow.
Um, James authoritatively declared Acts 15:19. It is my judgment that we do not trouble those who are turning to God from among the Gentiles. Moreover, the letter that was sent out regarding the judgment never mentions Peter.
Yeah.
So these are some interesting notes, um, that if Peter is the one who is given the keys to the church, like the authority over the church, I think we would have seen a difference in roles here, where
Yeah.
Peter would have been leading this. That Peter would have been mentioned, by Paul in these sort of situations. Like a lot of people like to point out that at the end of Romans, Paul sends his greetings to 26 people, doesn't mention Peter. I think that's somewhat of a weak argument, but it does like raise some questions. Like, why would he not talk to the Bishop of Rome if Peter was the Bishop of Rome?
Maybe because he wasn't there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Peter
that's my snarky side.
Peter himself never refers to himself as the leader of the church.
Right. Yeah.
Possibly that could have been humility, but I think Peter would have handed out more like decisive judgment had he truly been given that sort of a position as like the head of the entire church.
Yeah.
Um, I do agree he was extremely important to the early church. Um, in my mind, he's like the disciple. Like he is the leader of of the group of the disciples. Like he was the
Yeah.
oldest, presumably, and the most mature, even if he didn't always act like it. But I believe that Peter held a special place among the disciples.
Yeah.
But to say that Matthew 16 points to him as the rock, the historical view cannot support that.
I
Um,
would agree.
So yeah, those are our thoughts. We've got to jump out of here. We appreciate
Mm.
you guys being here. We would love to converse with you more. Please, leave some comments, debate with us. Just do it kindly. And if you want to talk with us more throughout the week, in between videos or suggest videos, come find us in the Discord. We'd love to chat with you guys. We really do appreciate any engagement that you guys give us, because it's just a lot more fun to have these kind of conversations. We can't always have guest speakers come on and kind of debate with us on here, so we love to get that in the Discord and in the YouTube comments section.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jacob, as far as farewells? I know Kevin's got to get out of here.
Now, just a reminder to everybody, as far as we're concerned, we draw a line between salvation issues and non-salvation issues, and ultimately for us, we don't believe that this specifically is a salvation issue. Whether the Catholic Church has authority or not, whether their basis for having authority, whether we agree with it or not. I mean, even Kevin, disagrees with me and Tyler a little bit on this, but you know what? Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's not what saves us. The thing that we're saved is by grace through faith, and that alone. It's nothing that we can do. It's nothing that we can earn. It's already been done through Jesus, and all that we're called to do is have a relationship with God. And so anything outside of that, yeah, we love to debate it. We love to talk about it. We want to refine our understanding and our knowledge so that we can grow closer to God. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we disagree, that's okay. It's not something that we believe is going to cost someone's salvation. And so I just wanted to remind everybody about that. We love you all. We hope you, even if you disagree with us, we hope that we can have a brotherly love, a brotherly, sisterly love between each other through Jesus. But like Tyler said, if you do disagree, come let us know in Discord. We'd love to chat about it.